Good morning. We're in deep with corners with Bachelard, part 4. In quoting this fragment by Melose, I have sought to present an unusually complete experience of a gloomy daydream. The daydream of a human being who sits motionless in his corner, where he finds a world grown over, grown old, and worn. Incidentally, I should like to point out the power that an adjective acquires as soon as it is applied to life. A gloomy life, or a gloomy person, marks an entire universe with more than just a pervading coloration. Even things become crystallizations of sadness, regret, or nostalgia. And when a philosopher looks to poets, to a great poet like Melose, for lessons in how to individualize the world, he soon becomes convinced that the world is not so much a noun as an adjective. I really like that. If we were to give the imagination its due in the philosophical systems of the universe, we should find, at their very source, an adjective. Indeed, to those who want to find the essence of a world philosophy, one could give the following advice: look for its adjective. But let us resume contact with shorter daydreams, the kind that are attracted by detail or by features of reality which at first seem insignificant. People never tire of recalling that Leonardo da Vinci advised painters who lacked inspiration when faced with nature to contemplate with a reflective eye the crack in an old wall, for there is a map of the universe in the lines that time draws on these old walls, and each of us has seen a few lines on the ceiling that appeared to chart a new continent. A poet knows all this. But in order to describe in his own way a universe of this kind, created by chance on the confines of sketch and dream, he goes to live in it. He finds a corner where he can abide in this cracked ceiling world. Thus we see a poet. Thus we see a poet take the hollow road of a piece of molding in order to reach his hut in the corner of a cornice. In his poems à l'être moi, Poems to My Other Self, Pierre Albert Bureau espouses, as they say, the curve that warms. The curve that warms. Soon its mild warmth calls upon us to curl up under the covers. To begin with, Albert Bureau slips into the molding. I follow the line of the moldings, which follow that of the ceiling. But if we listen to the design of things, we encounter an angle. A trap detains the dreamer. But there are angles from which one cannot escape. Yet even in this prison there is peace. In these angles and corners, the dreamer would appear to enjoy the repose that divides being and non-being. He is the being of an unreality. Only an event can cast him out. And just here the poet adds, but a klaxon made me come out of the angle where I was beginning to die of an angel's dream. It is easy for a rhetorician to criticize a text like this. Indeed, the critical mind has every reason to reject such images, such idle musings. First of all, because they are not reasonable, because we do not live in corners of the ceiling while lolling in a comfortable bed, because a spider's web is not, as the poet says, drapery, and to be more personal, because an exaggerated image is bound to seem ridiculous to a philosopher who seeks to concentrate being in its center and finds in a center a being, a sort of unity of time, place, and action. I'm going to say that paragraph again. First of all, because they are not reasonable, because we do not live in corners of the ceiling while lolling in a comfortable bed, because a spider's web is not, as the poet says, drapery, and to be more personal, because an exaggerated image is bound to seem ridiculous to a philosopher who seeks to concentrate being in its center, and finds in a center of being a sort of unity of time, place, and action. Yes, but even when the criticisms of reason, the scorn of philosophy and poetic traditions unite to turn us from the poet's labyrinth dreams, it remains nonetheless true that the poet has made a trap of dreamers out of his poem. As for me, I let myself be caught. I followed the molding. In an earlier chapter devoted to houses, I said that a house in an engraving may well incite a desire to live in it. We feel that we should like to live there, between the very lines of the engraved drawing. At times, too, the phantasm that impels us to live in corners comes into being by the grace of a mere drawing. But then, the grace of a curved line is not a simple Bergsonian movement with well-placed inflections, nor is it merely a time that unreels. It is also a habitable space, harmoniously constituted. We are again indebted to Pierre Albert Buron for an engraved corner, a lovely engraving in terms of literature. So now I have become a decorative drawing, sentimental scrolls, coiling spirals, an organized surface in black and white. And yet I just heard myself breathe. Is it really a drawing? Is it really I? Here it is as though the spiral greeted us with clasped hands. However, the drawing is more effective for what it encloses than for what it exfoliates. The poet feels this when he goes to live in the loop of a scroll to seek warmth and the quiet life in the arms of a curve. The intellectualist philosopher who wants to hold words to their precise meaning and uses them as the countless little tools of clear thinking is bound to be surprised by the poet's daring. And yet, a syncretism of sensitivity keeps words from crystallizing into perfect solids. Unexpected adjectives collect about the focal meaning of the noun. A new environment allows the word to enter not only into one's thoughts, but also into one's daydreams, language dreams. The critical mind can do nothing about this, for it is a poetic fact that a dreamer can write of a curve that it is warm. Does anyone think that Bergson did not exceed meaning when he attributed grace to curves, and no doubt inflexibility to straight lines? Why is it worse for us to say that an angle is cold and a curve warm, that the curve welcomes us and the oversharp angle rejects us, that the angle is masculine and the curve feminine? A modicum of quality changes everything. The grace of a curve is an invitation to remain. We cannot break away from it without hoping to return, for the beloved curve has nest-like powers. It incites us to possession. It is a curved corner, inhabited geometry. Here we have attained a minimum of refuge in the highly simplified pattern of a daydream of repose. But only the dreamer who curls up in contemplation of loops understands these simple joys of delineated repose. No doubt it is very rash on the part of a writer to accumulate in the final pages of a chapter disconnected ideas, images that only live in a single detail, and convictions, however sincere, which only last for an instant. But what else can be done by a phenomenologist who wants to brave teeming imagination, and for whom frequently a single word is the germ of a dream? When we read the works of a great word dreamer like Michel Leiris, particularly in his Befeurs. We find ourselves experiencing in words, on the inside of words, secret movements of our own. Like friendships, words sometimes swell at the dreamer's will in the loop of a syllable, while in other words everything is calm, tight. Even as sober a man as Joseph Joubert recognizes the intimate repose of words when he speaks of certain ideas rather curiously as huts. Words, I often imagine this, are little houses, each with its cellar and garret. Common sense lives on the ground floor, always ready to engage in foreign commerce on the same level as the others, as the passers-by, who are never dreamers. To go upstairs in the word house is to withdraw, step by step, while to go down to the cellar is to dream. It is losing oneself in the distant corridors of an obscure etymology, looking for treasures that cannot be found in words. To mount and descend in the words themselves, this is a poet's life. To mount too high or descend too low is allowed in the case of poets who bring earth and sky together. Must the philosopher alone be condemned by his peers always to live on the ground floor? That's the end of Corners. He did leave us rather abruptly, with a lot to think about.